Hi, I hope everybody can hear me. Great. Greetings from Jakarta. It's literally midnight here, so sorry if I look very sleepy. If everyone can hear me, I can start. So, my name is Val Gandhi, and I work for an organization called Dev Cafe. Primarily an evaluator, but at the same time, I also do because I moved from software to development. We test multiple disruptive technologies to ensure its feasibilities for the development sector. Briefly about DevCafe, it was founded in 2001. It's based in Kenya, Indonesia, and Zambia, and serves as a platform for connecting grassroots. But we have three pillars: research for development, innovation, and ICT for D, and capacity building. And in our innovation and ICT 40, we test what is known as frugal innovation, where we try to change the ICT 40 uh, program or branch into more D for ICT, or guiding the technology rather than the technology industry guiding us. And in that space, we work with big data, drones, machine learning, and AI. I literally just arrived from Bangkok, where we hosted a workshop with on AI and for international development. And we work with Internet of Things and also, of course, blockchains or blockchain. And today's session, I will focus on blockchain, although in terms of use of technologies for data or for M&E, these occur as a package rather than individual or isolated technologies. So, moving to today's discussion, I'll walk you through a little bit in 15 minutes. There's only a little I can say about blockchains, but I'm sure you'll look it up more and hopefully be interested in exploring what this is all about. And I'm going to walk you through blockchain 101 and see how blockchain can be used for M&E and how M&E can be used for blockchain. And I will present brief examples of three of our case studies that show how blockchain is used in M&E. Um, Essentially, blockchain is a distributed public ledger, which is considered as a new model for record keeping. If you see the image on the left, most of our public ledgers or transactions are stored by a central authority. Be it if you work in a village, there will be multiple landowners, and all of their land titles or land information are presented at the um, are stored at the central authority. It could be the village head or village administration. But in the case of a blockchain, there is no central authority. Everyone who participates in the blockchain has equal access to the data about land and or any other information, and then one cannot modify the data without the others knowing or others consensus. So it's a decentralized public ledger. And why is decentralization so important? Is because it is inclusive, because everyone has access to data. There's very little manipulation, and it's robust because everyone has digital ledger around the world. If you've ever used cryptocurrencies and other things, it doesn't rely on one person's active hosting of a server or a database, but since it's owned by everyone and it changes real time, power outages or natural disasters does not destroy the ledger. And it's uncensorable because it's public, it's available to everyone, so you cannot censor it, and anybody can participate in it. But sometimes people think it's public doesn't necessarily mean all your data is visible publicly. It works in terms of hash keys. Hash keys is basically a digital representation of anything that you would type or file, or everything can be converted into hash keys online. And so you need specific hash keys to access specific transactions. So it is still secure. And it is egalitarian because the network is of the masses. There are no geographic discriminations or monopolies, and there is no centralized authority. And at least for development professionals, removing decentralization is a very interesting concept to have. To walk you through what would a real blockchain would consist of is the ability of multiple people to make additions. It's a write-only design as opposed to the other databases. If you work a lot with the Excel sheets or any other database, you know that it has four commands known as CRUD commands: create, read, update, and delete. But in a blockchain, you cannot delete what you put in there because it's an immutable database, and you can only add to the next transaction as an additional block. And that's important because you can see the provenance of transactions, and whether it's your car purchase, or whether it's some source of your housing or land details. And if it's on the blockchain, you can trace the provenance because it's a write-only design, and you can see every transaction. And the blockchain itself is hosted in a decentralized peer-to-peer network, and the consensus distributed is very distributed. So people need to agree on whether or not this is a legitimate transaction to make or accept and reject proposals in the blockchain. And essentially, in the public blockchain, there is an incentive structure integrated. And for instance, when people hold the public ledger and they earn cryptocurrencies. If you've heard of Bitcoin and other kinds of cryptocurrencies, these are one of the uses of blockchain, and that is what users who maintain the blockchain, they call miners, earn in return for earning the in return for running the blockchain. But in cases where you don't want the blockchain to be public, then you create what is known as a private blockchain, where the incentive to host it could be multiple initiatives. It could be a cryptocurrency that you specifically create for your particular program, or it can be simply a reward mechanism to earn credits. And I'll explain a little bit later with one of my case studies what I mean by that. And then, of course, the use of cryptography to ensure the security, integrity, and reliability of the information. So we ensure that the data that is put inside is secure because it is used with cryptic languages and hashtags. Um, I mean hashes. So M&E for blockchain. As much as the metaphor of a technology is always pushed, and same in case with the M&E blockchain. Everyone talks about blockchain as if it's the, I don't know, in some cultures, second coming of the Christ, or it's going to solve all the problems. And you probably have seen the hype is really, really high. Uh, while blockchain is certainly a very powerful technology and it has changed the way databases work, uh, again, it's like that old saying, garbage in, garbage out. So if you're not careful with what you put into the blockchain, you will simply be amplifying the existing social inequalities and problems that exist in society. Imagine if you, let's take Indian caste, Indian village example where there's high caste discrimination, and you suddenly want to put all the data of the land ownership into the blockchain without first verifying the social conditions in it and the justice situation and the questions of oppression and structured discrimination. You're going to make permanent things that exist, and that's why what you put into this has to be really, really. We should ensure that it is highly factual and reflects the reality of the situation. And as we all know, human development interventions are not always straightforward, and that's why these technologies should be carefully handled and guided by development professionals who know how society works, how the field conditions are here, rather than just some IT guy or tech company coming in telling you, oh, this is going to solve your refugee problem, women's issues, or supply chain problem. Great, but go through it systematically. And that's why I am more interested in M&E for blockchain rather than blockchain for M&E, because we already have powerful databases, and if we are using centralized database, which is immutable, then I think it's a great opportunity for us to get involved in this space because there's so much funding and so much hype going on, which is scary because people who do not understand technology, who do not understand society, build systems and technologies for society without the guidance of those who do understand. and that is a terrible disaster, as we keep seeing every day what technology does, but whether it's Facebook or not. Uh, so, sorry. But still, having said that and given those warnings, M&E for blockchain, it is very powerful in terms of collecting real-time data. You can do micropayments. If you've ever worked in conflict zone like Somalia or Iraq and Afghanistan, you may have heard of the Hawala system, which is the ancient, precursor to even modern banking, I would say. But it still exists, where even some UN agencies transfer money, millions of dollars in seconds, through this trusted network of peers. But that is a very physical representation, and you can get anywhere from minus five, 10 cents and to $10 million, and that is true of blockchain as well. If you just want to send in 60 cents to someone, you can't do that in a bank. And if you send like 60 million, bank charges you heavy, what is this, search charges and service charges. So those ones can be avoided in a blockchain, because there's almost zero to minimal transaction fees, and you can send as low as possible. And then you can track provenance and source, especially if you're working on trafficking or non-timber finance, for forest products or other issues. Then that is the case where you can track the source of a product. And then supply chain, identity, health records, personally identifiable information on data, and then all data within a blockchain is controlled by the respondent, and so they see, and they can give access to you on how much of their data you could use. So it is still a powerful tool. But as I indicated before, blockchain M&E is still in an emerging stage, because blockchain is a new technology, and we all know evaluating innovations is very challenging, and because we can't judge something that was done as expected when we are in the middle of creating it. And a lot of these blockchain projects, including ours, are in the nascent stages of testing, and we can't do a traditional evaluation of a baseline, midline, and landline, because many of these factors, when people involve or people are interacting with new technologies, is not tested and tried for several years. And so keeping up with that kind of proving versus improving of evaluation is difficult, where we are simply measuring what is the impact and how many people did we reach. It's not going to work, and we need to start thinking about innovative ways to think of evaluating M&E. So one of the ways to address that is, we see what is the problem that needs to be addressed, why blockchain should be used, and these kind of questions from a user-centered perspective or participatory research perspective has to be. Uh, for some reason, I can't see my slides. Hold on, please. I'll try to use my own slides. Yeah. What are the challenges of using blockchain in this space, and what risks it might bring? And again, blockchain is an innovation, which means there's less evidence, as I mentioned, so it will require frameworks that use a problem-driven iterative approach. And I would suggest something like what which you're also testing. Professor Michael Quinn Patton's developmental evaluation is a very good idea, a very good methodology to use, because it doesn't necessarily go from a linear point A to B kind of evaluation, but rather grows from a, like, software development phases of agile. The goal is not just to measure outcomes of something, but iteratively measure what's happening when people interact on a regular basis. It can be expensive, it can be time consuming, but one of the ways to measure technology that evolves as fast as blockchain is used either developmental evaluation or complexity aware tools, like sentinel indicators and others, combining both of these. And that's what we are trying to do, where there's a co-creation happening between the users, the development professionals, the technology providers, as well as the other stakeholders involved. Um, and there is this concept of principles of digital development, which has nine principles, which is in it was established by Digital Impact Alliance, which is a consortium based out of the US, but they're trying to bring uh, concepts of user-centered design and understanding the ecosystem, reuse and improve and utilizing open data and so on and so forth. There are nine principles. You can look it up later. Though that's also one of the ways in which you can test technology. Although there's no one way to do it because this field of innovations and evaluation is evolving, and that's why some of us are testing it in ways in which we can measure it. I would, if you are venturing into any kind of disruptive technology, I would recommend a book by Professor Matthew Salganik, which was recommended to me by Professor Michael Bamberger. It's called Bit by Bit: Doing Social Research in the Digital Age, where they highlight different options in which we can use methodologies, and the way we do research has evolved. The previous presenter was talking about big data. Again, how do you deal with such fast incoming real data? And then, in a ways, blockchain is big data because it generates multiple data points from literally the whole world of users who use it in a blockchain, in a public blockchain. And then, for moving on to the blockchain for MNE, let me come back to the blockchain as quality control protocols. As I mentioned, it is a shared immutable ledger with highly secure hash tags and hash keys. So that can be an automatic quality control procedure protecting the data of the users and respondents. Sorry about the spelling mistake, but collection of data in the blockchain in real time using IoTs and smart sensors tied to an incentive is also possible, which can enable collection of real-time big data or even a micro level data depending on where you're selecting it. But the current state of MNE on blockchain is we are still at the early stages of developing and exploring the blockchain, working on developing frameworks with together with other technologies that I mentioned, like big data, IoTs, and AI. Moving further, three of our cases I'm probably running out of time, so I'm going to walk through is one is three of our project is one is project IAM, which is blockchain for refugees, and Senegal Ocean to Table, and the third is in Mekong Valley called Rice Blockchain. If you want to look up others outside of Dev Cafe, you can look at these links. Fair Chain Coffee, WFP is Refugee Identity Blockchain, and then if you want a list of blockchains based for international development projects, you can look at the Stanford master list, which is in this link. So uh, l- looking at these projects, we considered these questions before we started the project because we didn't want to jump into the hype cycle and say, let's use blockchain. But we wanted to ask whether or not blockchain is useful, and we approached it from a problems perspective rather than pushing a technology as a hammer looking for a nail situation. So we asked whether we need to eliminate centralized trust, who are the actors, is it the user problem centered, and can it not be solved with any other technology? And how do we measure if it's working? How do we improve? And what is the impact in terms of not just the outcomes, but also what are the processes and how can it be documented? And these are some of the questions we considered before we tested the use of blockchain. In the first one, the project IAM is Blockchain for Refugees project, which is at the moment concentrated in Indonesia, and we have some pilot in Finland to compare a, refugee accord signatory versus uh, refugee accord inventory and compared it with refugee accord non-signatory. So the project itself is simple. We train our the refugees in our care and in digital tools. If you've heard of the term digital nomads, we create our refugee kids, and we teach them on simple digital jobs like search engine optimization, basic coding, or medical transcription, word processing, and things like that. and they are linked through a platform built by DevCafe into jobs that are available to them specifically. And we partner with Upwork, freelancer, as well as independent companies. And they are able to sign up just like they would in LinkedIn and access them and create their own online identity, because in countries like Indonesia, refugees do not exist. Even there are 18,000 of them, but they don't exist officially because it's not a recipient country. So they cannot work or they cannot have an education. Although majority of the refugees here are 18 to 25-year-old in their active, most active economically as well as mentally active stage. Nevertheless, they are frustrated. Some of them commit suicide and live in constant insecurity and hopelessness because of their situation where they do not know where they will go next.
Sorry, Valentine, that I had to interrupt you. I need to ask you to please, if you could summarize your remaining slides in 1 or 2 minutes before we give the floor to the next presenter, so we don't um, take up more of his time. Sorry, and I'm giving you back the floor now.
Yes. Sorry, so that's the one use case of blockchain. The other one is tracking the. This is where I was talking about IoT. So that we want to summarize, but you can always reach out to me later. In this, we encourage best practices in climate smart farming by incentivizing farmers who have IoT devices, which is Internet of Things, smart sensors devices installed both in the wrist as well as in the field. And whenever the sensor sends them lack of water, and when a farmer does the correct measure of adding water when the soil moisture is low and other examples, they then get rewarded in the blockchain, which they can exchange with their local kiosk. So it collects data at real time as well as promotes farm climate smart farm behavior. The other one, last one, is ocean to table Senegal. Senegal has problems of fishing, illegal fishing, which goes to a loss of close to $300 million, and we've built up a protocol where an RFID chip is placed each time a fish is caught anywhere in the coast of Senegal, and it's tracked until the time it reaches where it should be rightfully reaching, which is at your table. Um, so a blockchain by its nature is associated with innovations such as big data and IoTs, and it cannot function anyway because otherwise, because blockchain is basically a distributed ledger. You can store data, but you need to add data through Internet of Things or big data sources to collect or store information. Final words, you can think about what individual areas which you can start using blockchain tech in your areas of intervention, whether it's supply chain or health sector, so many areas, and you can document and see what do you see as one of the challenges, and go and push the technology rather than being pushed by the technology itself. I mean, the ideas has a new thematic innovation group this year called Innovations in Evaluation, where we are trying to test blockchain and other IoT and disruptive technology, and how can we use evaluation methods and how can we expand the evaluation methods. So, as professionals, as development professionals, I would recommend us to invest in agile projects, proof of concepts. What I mean by agile is not a waterfall kind of activities, inputs, outputs, outcomes approach, but more kind of a scrum. You can see if you Google agile processes, it's about certain learning cycles and adaptive management cycles rather than quickly going into a long-term 5-year plan. And then try to promote. We had a workshop in Jakarta where we invited Professor Rick Davis and Professor Michael to test big data and other blockchain-based devices. And again, I say there are a lot of snake oil technology companies there which keep selling about blockchain or big data as if the only key. I just came from a tech conference, but I think the most important need of the hour is for evaluators and development professionals to be guiding the tech industry rather than the other way around. Thank you for having me, and Salamat Malam from Jakarta. And these are some of the resources I've stored here. You are happy to look at it.